Hey guys, just like I told you yesterday, wasn't going to be able to make it in today because I am off somewhere at a meeting. You guys are sitting there, I'm somewhere over there, and through the miracle of technology, here I am. So we're going to be starting a new unit, and we're going to be focusing on kind of the same idea. We're looking at the development of Western civilization, the influences on modern day civilizations in the Western world, including the United States and Europe. So with this beginning part of the unit, we're going to be looking at the Middle Ages, and starting off around 800 or so CE, so the Common Era. There's this dude named Charlemagne, and he is essentially going to become the ruler of what was the Roman Empire. One thing that's kind of different about Charlemagne is he's not Italian, he's actually German. So that's kind of interesting, because that's going to bring a new element to what's going on in Western civilization in terms of power and influence. So, you've got the just the whole Roman legacy itself, like all the things we talked about in the last unit with the Republic and the development of Christianity in particular. But now you got to bring into it the traditions and customs of the Germanic people. Just the power of the Christian church itself. I mean, the Catholic Church is going to be just huge, super powerful during the Middle Ages. And Europe at this time really does become the center of Western civilization during the Middle Ages. And the Middle Ages itself, you can judge for yourself, but I don't think you're going to see a ton of things coming out of there that you would say, oh yes, this totally is influencing our society that we live in today. So maybe some of this will kind of serve as like a counterbalance. But I mean, definitely we kind of go through this period, and we're going to find that through this rougher period that people are going to say, I have rights. And I think it's from this experience in the Middle Ages and what we'll be looking at, feudalism, that you're going to have a whole group of people saying things aren't right and we need to change things. So once that happens, then Europe is going to move in an entirely different direction. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what was going on during the Middle Ages. This thing's kind of funny. Think about what we talked about when we looked at Rome with the idea of the development of law within Rome. We looked at the 12 tables in particular. You have these codified laws that are in the forum. Everyone sees them. I have rights and whatever. The trial by ordeal is kind of interesting. Basically with the trial by ordeal, if you were accused of something, you basically had to go through some type of an ordeal to prove your innocence or your guilt. So for example, you have what's called the judgment of the glowing iron. So if you were accused of something, they give you this red hot iron. And with that red hot iron, they'd make you hold it in your hand for period of time, and then they would bandage your hand up because it'd be all like blistered and stuff like that and be all oozing and gross. And then they'd bandage your hand up, and then like 3 days or so what they would do is they would take the bandages off and they would look at your hands. If your hands were infected, well, you must be guilty. So then they can execute you as a result of that. They also have the test of the boiling water, which was kind of the same thing, where they have this big old vat of boiling water, and they make you stick your hands inside of this big old vat of water, hot boiling water. And the same thing, they would bandage your hands up, and then a few days later they would unwrap them, and then if your hands were infected in any way, then that would mean you were guilty. They also had another one for murder. So if you were accused of murder, they'd like lay out the guy's body, and they would put the accuser next to the body, and they had this belief that if the guy who murdered that person was next to them, that for whatever reason the blood would start flowing from the dead guy. So there was that one. There was also what's called the test of the cold water, and I think this engraving that I have in the background, I think that might be depicting the test of the cold water. So basically what they would do, you're accused of something, they would tie you up like this poor bloke right here, and they'd throw you in the water. So they throw you in the water, and essentially if you would float to the top, that would mean that you're guilty. And that sounds kind of weird. The reason why is because they believed water was like divine, and if you were guilty, you were an immoral, corrupt icky person, so the water is going to expel you. So that's why they would say that if you floated to the top, then you were basically guilty. Well, then think about it. Let's see, if you were innocent, you would sink. You're tied up. Oh, you're gonna drown. That sounds logical, right? So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if you're guilty, you float to the top, they take you out, and they execute you. If you are not guilty, you sink to the bottom and you drown. Excellent, right? Yeah, I'm not sure how well this system of quote-unquote justice actually worked out, but that's what they did. They also had trial by combat, so you have two people who may have been accused of something, so they pit the two against each other, so they literally fight each other, and whoever wins must be innocent, whoever doesn't win is guilty. You could actually pay for somebody to fight for you, so that kind of worked against the poorer people. So if I was a rich person, I could hire the biggest, brawniest, muscular dude that I could find. He'd fight for me. And, against some skinny guy who can't afford anyone else, I'm going to win. So therefore, because I'm rich, I guess, I must be not guilty. So these are some of the things that they did that were part of their quote-unquote justice system. Again, I'm not sure really, what this fully is going to accomplish in terms of any real justice. But that was, part of the Middle Ages. What we're really going to be focusing on is we're going to be looking at the system of feudalism. When Charlemagne died, a new system is going to emerge for various reasons, which we'll look at, I believe, in the next slide. But when you look at just what is feudalism, I'm sure you guys learned about this when you were in junior high. It's a social, political, and economic system. So socially, it is going to create this really rigid hierarchy with kings on top, and then you've got like lords and vassals and knights and all these serfs on the bottom, and there's no movement, no social movement up and down the social ladder. Basically, you are where you are. It's also a political system, local government. You've got the king who's he has his lords, and then those lords essentially, with all the land they have, they create their own political systems and local government, and then they have military defense, because below the lords we're going to have all of the knights, so the knights provide that defense for this entire feudal manor. Then it's also an economic system, self-sufficient agricultural manners, and who's going to be doing the growing of the food and all of that? Of course, it's going to be the people on the very bottom, who are the serfs. But everyone benefits from this in some way. I mean, obviously, some are going to benefit way more than others. So let's take a look at this a little bit more. So why was feudalism on the rise in Europe during the Middle Ages? So what's going on? So you had the fall of the Roman Empire in 476, and when that happens, basically this tight government that had been in control and providing stability throughout the region, when that's gone, it's going to allow for other opportunists, other groups like barbarians and Vikings, and they're going to go in and they're just going to wreak havoc and terrorize people throughout Europe, and they're going to plunder and take what they can, take land and kill people and whatnot. So there really needed to be, like I have down here, there really needed to be some type of protection, a system of protection, to protect people from these barbarians and Vikings that were out there just completely terrorizing Europe. So there needed to be some type of protection. That's kind of the main thing when it comes to feudalism. So you've got all kinds of, the vast majority of people within the system are going to be these farmers, these serfs. There's lots and lots of them. And they're defenseless. They don't have any ability really to protect themselves. So you need to have some type of protection put in place, but you're not going to do it for free. So there's got to be some type of exchange of some sort. So we'll see that the serfs are going to be working the land in exchange for protection from the knights. So here's one diagram of how feudalism works. So think of it a feudal pyramid of power. Again, it's a really strict hierarchy. So on top of society, you have the king. Below them are the nobles. Then you have the knights or the vassals, and then you have the vast majority of peasants, and they're also called serfs. So who's getting what out of this? Because again, it's a system of exchange. All right. So the king basically is giving land to the nobles. All right. So, and that's called a fief. So a fief is land. So the nobles get land, and then what the nobles are going to do, they're pledged to honor the king. And the king is going to need protection from other kingdoms. So the nobles are going to give land to vassals. These are the knights. So this is the military. So these nobles are going to create like these big manors, and they're going to split up the land some more. They're going to give some land to the knights, and then basically in exchange for the land, the knights are going to provide the protection. And then also the knights are going to provide land to the peasants, some land, not a ton of land. I think the peasants may have, maybe have had maybe no more than 10 acres, or that may be very generous, but small tracts of land where they actually are going to grow food. And that really is what the peasants do. They feed everybody. Okay, so everyone gets something. So everyone's getting some land. As you see the land being exchanged, and then going this direction over here. So the peasants are responsible for growing the food and feeding everyone, and whatever services maybe that the knights may need. You might have a peasant who might be a blacksmith or something, and they need something made for the knight. So food and services from the peasants go to the knights, and then the knights also, they provide the protection and military service. And you can really draw an arrow going out this way to the peasants as well, because the knights will also, you have it right here actually, with the land and protection. So the knights will provide protection basically for the whole kingdom, which is this. All right. So protection and military service, and then the nobles are going to provide money and knights to the king. Now the nobles are going to be collecting like taxes from the knights and from the peasants also. And so the king is going to collect those taxes. So the king is enriched. The king gets everything if you think about it. The king gets the food, they get the services, they get the military protection, they're going to get the taxes. So, I mean, the king is the one who scores the most in this relationship. But for the most part, again, everyone kind of gets something. But understand, with the peasants, that even though they may get some land and they're getting protection, that their rights were extremely limited. They didn't have the freedom of movement. They didn't have civil or political rights, really at all. So it wasn't the best system in the world. But again, because you needed protection, because of the fact that the empire is gone, and you have these foreigners coming in, they're attacking. This is a nice little system here to kind of keep things in order. Here's another diagram of feudalism that I think is kind of cool. So think of it as cooperation and mutual obligations, because that's really it is. Everyone here, from the king to the peasants, they're cooperating together, but they all are obligated to each other in some shape or form. I don't know, the king isn't necessarily obligated to do much of anything for any of these people, but he does provide that land initially to the lords here, which kind of gets everything going. So feudalism, it's a political system. It's also an economic system. So it's a political system of local government, and you have relationships between the members of the nobility. The lord and his vassals administer justice and were the highest authority in their land. So in the manors that are created, the lords here are the ones pretty much in charge of the knights and the peasants. The economic aspects of feudalism, agriculture, and land, that's the basis for wealth. So you've got the peasants pretty much providing all of the food and the agriculture, which is basically propping up everybody else. So the land's divided up into self-sufficient manors. Peasants worked the land, paid rent in exchange for protection. And then in terms of exchange, you had usually bartering, because most of these people aren't going to have like a ton of money. So bartering would be like exchanging stuff. So I'll give you 10 bushels of corn if I can have 3 bushels of wheat or whatever. But it's also a very rigid social hierarchy. Like I said, there's no movement up and down. There's no, you go to school, you get an education, you improve yourself, you get to move from a peasant to a lord. It's just not going to happen. These people are born into these positions and they die in these positions. Now, normally what I do at this point in time is I would do a simulation where we would simulate what feudalism was like, but obviously we're not going to do that. It's a little activity I do with, actually it says M&Ms, but actually with Skittles, and you don't have to read through this, but in essence what happens is that everyone gets Skittles. If you're the king, you get more than anyone else, obviously, and through an exchange system that we go through, that basically the king has the most Skittles at the end, the vassals, or that should say the lords will have the second highest amount of Skittles, then the vassals, and then the serfs are literally left with 2 Skittles. So it's a very unequal system socially, politically, and economically. So I'm going to show you guys a short clip of feudalism. I believe it's Discovery Channel video. So let me get that queued up and I'm back in a sec. I lied. Try it again. Alright, I'm back. So we're going to watch this video on feudalism in the Middle Ages. I can't get rid of me, so it's going to be kind of awkward. You guys are going to be watching a video and I'm just going to be sitting there in the corner staring at you guys. Alright, hopefully this will work.
The Middle Ages began when the Western Roman Empire fell in the 5th century. This period lasted for hundreds of years.
The Middle Ages began when the Western Roman Empire fell in the 5th century. This period lasted for hundreds of years. Without the Romans to provide protection, medieval Europe became a violent and dangerous place.
By Vikings, Magyars, Muslims, and other raiders weakened European
Frequent foreign invasions by Vikings, Magyars, Muslims, and other raiders weakened European rulers, so that they could not maintain law and
wealthy
order.
nobles seeking to expand their power and land holdings began
Seizing
fighting
the
one another
opportunity,
for territory.
wealthy nobles seeking to expand
Out
their
of this
power and
chaos
land
emerged a
holdings
new
began
political
fighting
and
one
social
another
system
for
called
territory.
feudalism. Because
Out
European
of this
kings
chaos
weren't strong
emerged a
enough to
new
control the
political and
battling
social
nobles who
system
were
called
challenging their power.
feudalism.
They struck a
Because
deal with them
European
instead.
kings weren't strong enough to control the battling nobles who were challenging their power, they struck
In
a
a
deal
formal
with them
ceremony,
instead.
a monarch would give a noble a fief, or grant of land. The monarch
In a
also
formal
promised to
ceremony,
protect the
a
noble.
monarch would give a noble a fief, or grant of land.
In
The
exchange,
monarch
the
also
noble
promised to
swore an oath
protect
of
the
loyalty,
noble.
vowing to be faithful to his lord, the monarch.
In exchange, the noble swore an oath of loyalty, vowing to be faithful to his
Through this
lord, the
feudal
monarch,
contract, the
and to
noble
supply
became the
him with
vassal of
armed
the king
warriors
or
and other
queen.
services.
The monarch's
Through this
vassals
feudal
became
contract,
lords
the
themselves
noble
by
became the
subdividing
vassal of
their
a king
fiefs
or
and
queen.
acquiring vassals of their own.
The monarch's
Like their
vassals became
overlords,
lords
these lesser
themselves
nobles
by
had to
subdividing
publicly
their
promise their
fiefs and
loyalty and
acquiring
support
vassals
in
of their
return for
own.
land and
Like
protection.
their overlords,
Often
these
the same
lesser
man was
nobles had to
both lord
publicly
and
promise their
vassal,
loyalty and
lord
support
to a
in
less
return for
powerful
land
noble
and
below
protection.
him, and vassal
Often
to
the
a
same
more
man was
powerful
both
noble
lord
above him.
and vassal.
Feudal
Lord to
society
a
had a
less
strict
powerful
social
noble below
order.
him,
The
and
monarch
vassal
was at
to
the
a
top.
more powerful
Directly
noble
below
above
him
him.
were the upper
Feudal
nobility.
society had a
Even though
strict
they were
social
below
order.
the king,
The
it was
monarch was
these
at the top.
local lords who
Directly
controlled
below
most
him were
people's
the upper
lives.
nobility. Even though they were below the
The
king,
social
it was
hierarchy
these
continued
local
down
lords who
through the rest
controlled
of
most
society.
people's lives.
Just under the nobility were the knights,
The
mounted
social
warriors who
hierarchy
did battle for
continued
their lords.
down through the rest of society. Just under the nobility were the
Nobles
knights,
also
mounted
sometimes
warriors who
hired
did
men at
battle for their
arms,
lords.
soldiers who had the same equipment as knights, but not their social
Nobles
standing.
also sometimes hired men at arms, soldiers who had the same
peasants
equipment
were
as
at the
knights,
bottom of the
but not
social
their
order.
social standing.
They were generally poor, uneducated
The
laborers
peasants were at
who
the
lived
bottom
and
of the
worked on the
social
land
order.
owned by the nobles.
They were generally poor, uneducated
were the
laborers
economic
who
backbone of
lived and
society,
worked on the land
growing the
owned by
crops
the
and
nobles.
producing the other goods that everyone needed.
The peasants were the economic
considered part of the
backbone of
land they
society.
lived on,
growing the crops and producing the other goods that everyone needed. The peasants were considered part of the land they lived on. When a noble received a fief of land, he received the peasants who lived on it too. Peasants couldn't leave the land without the Lord's permission, and they had to obey the Lord's laws. They also had to work for the Lord, farming his lands and giving him regular payments of what they produced. In return, the peasants were allowed to farm some of the Lord's land for themselves.
And protection of the Lord's laws and his
Perhaps
armies.
more important during this chaotic period, they enjoyed the stability and protection of the Lord's laws and his
bandits and
armies.
raiders from outside Europe were a serious
These
threat.
were big benefits during the Middle Ages,
A
when
main source of
competing
protection
lords,
during the Middle
bandits,
Ages
and
was a
raiders
castle.
from outside Europe were a
An
serious
army
threat.
that was barricaded inside a castle
A
was
main source of
incredibly
protection
difficult
during
to
the Middle
defeat.
Ages was a castle.
And nobles safe inside
An
their
army that
castles
was
were able to
barricaded
build up their
inside a
armies
castle
and
was
expand their
incredibly
power.
difficult to defeat. And nobles safe
But the
inside their
castles were
castles
more
were
than
able
just
to build up their
strongholds for the
armies and
nobility.
expand their
They
power.
also protected the entire community.
But
During
the
times
castles
of
were
trouble,
more than
the
just
local peasants
strongholds for
gathered
the
for
nobility.
safety inside
They
the
also
castle walls
protected the
and
entire
often helped to
community.
defend the castle.
During times of trouble, the local
Under
peasants
feudalism,
gathered for
the
safety
overlords,
inside
lesser
the castle
lords,
walls
knights, and
and
peasants
often
all
helped to defend
depended
the
on one
castle.
another for survival.
Under feudalism, the
Life
overlords,
may
lesser
not have been
lords,
easy for
knights,
most
and
people,
peasants
but
all
feudalism
depended on
turned
one another
chaos
for
into order
survival.
and offered stability during a violent
Life may
and
not have been
uncertain
easy for
age.
most people, but feudalism turned chaos into order and offered stability during a violent and uncertain age.
Alright, back again. So again, it was just a little video to kind of reinforce what I was talking about in terms of what feudalism is and how it's structured. And I think the stability part is pretty important. But again, keep in mind, this isn't the most equal system in the world. And again, when we look at Western civilization, development of democracy, this is not a democratic system in any shape or form. These are some questions I want you guys to think about. What need would the nobles and king have for all the food? Because you have the serfs providing massive amounts of food. In the simulation I do, like I said, the king and the nobles, they have something like 80-90 Skittles, and the serfs have 2. So why would the nobles and the king, why would they need, what purpose would there be for that? And then think about it when it comes to the peasants and any choice that they may have had in the situation, in terms of if they wanted to not provide or provide food. Did they really have much of a choice in this type of a relationship? Could a peasant say no? For instance, if a vassal came to them and said, I want, so many bushels of corn by this time. You can think about why feudalism actually worked in the first place. And again, because we were so focused in the last unit on the development of democracy, we looked at direct democracy in Greece, a republic in Rome. We talked about the development of law also, and the idea of individual worth and stuff like this. Think about feudalism, democratic, undemocratic features. Try to see if you can find any similarities. And I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of things that are different. So similarities and differences between feudalism and what we've been talking about in terms of democracy. And then I think that is kind of key to looking at the next question in terms of what do you think will lead to the downfall of feudalism? Because obviously feudalism is not going to last. So, what is it that people want when it comes to their social, political, and economic livelihood? Do they want to live in this type of a system where you're born into a system and you have no ability to go anywhere else? And what incentive is there? I mean, for this system, the incentive is the protection. But at some point in time, you're not going to need that anymore. So think about that. So think about the idea of democracy in particular, and how people yearn for political systems where they have more individual freedoms and political and civil rights. And as we'll see, time and time again, when it comes to the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, there are revolutions in South America, and they're all overthrowing monarchs. What is it about this type of a system that people want to escape from? And who actually is the head of those movements? Time and time again, like I said, we're going to be seeing the serfs and the lower people in society. They're the ones who are going to be saying, you know what, we want something else. We want something different. We want rights. So that brings us to the end of what I wanted to present to you guys. So for the rest of the period, you should grab a textbook, work on your textbook outlines for this week. Pages 154 to 156 is on feudalism and what we talked about today. If you're already done with that, then continue on because there are more readings. You can grab a calendar from the back of the room if you need to. Main thing here is that nobody is doing nothing. So please make sure that you are being productive for the time that you guys have left. And I will be back, I think, 4th period. So if you have any questions about anything, come on in during 5th period lunch after school. Alrighty? Until then, adios.